Welcome to the USU Career Studio podcast that helps you navigate your career path. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to tell your friends and family all about it. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else you listen to get access to our newest content. Thanks for joining us for our Friday face-to-face episode. I'm Marissa Armitstead, your host, and I'm so excited to welcome alum and USU employee Ricky Flores to the show. Welcome, Ricky.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Ricky is a marketing manager for Utah State University statewide campuses. Ricky has been involved with professional marketing for nearly 18 years, beginning at the Utah Film Commission and now continuing at USU. Ricky manages and facilitates the marketing strategy of several USU campuses across the Wasatch Front. Ricky, I am so excited to have you on the show today. You have some of the most unique experience I think I've ever heard of. So I'm just really excited to chat about how in the heck you got to where you are. But before we dive in, we have to share your fun fact. So the movie Sandlot was actually filmed completely in Utah, minus the final scene. So tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so it is a very popular movie. One of the biggest films that I think everybody has seen. Everybody's seen The Sandlot. In fact, I've been a part of like a couple of anniversary screenings here in Utah. Because The Sandlot still exists. The actual Sandlot still exists in the Glendale area. So I think like every 5 years or so they have a Sandlot.
That's awesome.
Screening, yeah. And actually, we started it at the Film Commission. My previous boss, Marshall Moore, who was really one of his favorite movies. He was the heart and soul of getting that underway. But yeah, it's a very popular movie, and people are always, they don't know how much of the movie is filmed in Utah, and it's most of that entire film was in Utah, shot in Salt Lake City and in Ogden. So yeah.
Wild. What a fun thing.
Yeah, it has a pretty big cast too. It has James Earl Jones and I can't remember the comedian's name, but he's in it. And
tons of big names. So cool. Well, and this is actually a really great segue. So today it's funny because we're having you on the show because you have a business degree. That's how I'm sneaking you in today. But really, I'm actually really curious to talk about your current role as a marketing manager here at USU. But before we get too deep, I actually really want to talk us through like starting with your bachelor's degree at the U. You a little bit rude there, went to the U for a hot second. It's okay. I did too. But so talk to us about your degree there and how did all of that turn into working for USU now?
Yeah. So when when I knew to go to college, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into some kind of movie and film production. So I was, since I think high school, I was my whole gear, my whole focus. And you got to remember, I'm kind of older than a lot of other people out there who probably have this degree. We didn't have accessible cameras on our phones. We didn't even have mobile phones.
Yeah.
A little bit more difficult for us back then. But that was my goal. And so I went to school. I went to the U, started film school there, and just went through the motions there. Did everything I could. Graduated. And after that, I started working on some films, and I quickly realized I did not like working on set. Set for me was one of these things I just did not mesh with me. I was a PA. That's how you start out most of the time in the film world. Is you become a production assistant, a PA. There's set PAs, and that's what I was doing. And I was expecting. It was kind of a really strange moment for me. It's like I just did all this and I do not like this at all. So I didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't like working on set. It wasn't I didn't like media or the movies or anything like that. I just didn't like working on set. So I had decided that I would focus on what I really like doing, and that was editing. So I decided, I'm going to try to get into editing. So I did some interning at a production studio, did some interning there, did some editing stuff there. Then I went on to work at Channel 2 News, where I wanted to become, they have news editors there. And I heard a lot of people who got their starts there being news editors. So I started going down that road. But then it started taking way too long. It was like one of these things where it's just like, I'm not breaking into it as fast as I wanted to. So I decided to, just kind of take matters into my own hands. So I left Channel 2, started doing a lot of freelance work, and did, some camera stuff, did a lot of editing stuff, did some sound work. but that kind of grew into other things as well. I mean, when you're kind of your own shop, you start learning other tools. So I was learning Photoshop, Illustrator. I was doing a lot of graphic design stuff. Nothing, nothing great or big or huge, but I was learning those tools, like web development as well. And next thing I know, I'm helping some people out with database creation, creating databases and formulating databases and
just by accident.
them. Just because I knew how to operate a computer and I knew how Excel worked, and I could figure out programs pretty easily, how they operated, and people, needed that service. So I supplied it to them, and then that would probably develop into, hey, I also need a web page. Can you help me out with the web page? Just, yeah, sure. You design that out and help them out. And maybe they would want some kind of video piece or something like that created, and help them with that. So that's what I just started doing for several years. And then, as I kept on going, I'd work, freelance work is very hit and miss. This mostly the film industry. People that work in the film industry know this very well. It's like they work sometimes and they don't work sometimes. So, when I worked, I did as much as I could. When I didn't work, I had to get a job or do something. So that's what I did. And it kind of, it's always kind of unsteady at times. So I ended up doing a job at the Utah Film Commission. It was just something they needed help with organizing photos. Back then, digital cameras just on the cusp, but we still had hard photos to show images of locations across the state. So they had actual physical pictures that you would put in folders and distribute out to producers and directors for them to look at. So this was way before digital images came into being. I would say probably about 3 or 4 years before that. And I spoke about Marshall Moore earlier on, and he's the one who was like, I worked with him on Touched by an Angel, and I worked with him at the Utah Film Commission. He kind of brought a bunch of us in while we were out of work in the film industry. And I ran into an old film school buddy who was working at the Film Commission. His name was Aaron Syret. His name is Aaron Syret. And we had an acting class together. We had just a great time in film school, and hadn't seen him in years. And he was working there as their marketing person. Mm. And he came into me and we were just chatting, and he was complaining about a problem he was having on a design project. And I said, oh, all you need to do is this. And I can't remember what it was. And he's like, really? And I said, yeah, I can show you. So I showed him, and he's just like, Mary, he just like looks at me and says, how do you know all this stuff? And I was just like, I just taught myself and did stuff. He's like, this, and he's like, I got to get you hired on here. And I was like, yeah, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. And it did take a little while, but about I would say about a year later, I was kind of going back and forth doing some odd jobs for them here and there, for the Film Commission. And then next thing I know, they said, hey, we have an opening. Would you like to come in? I said, yeah, sure. So I ended up coming in as a program specialist, is what they called it. And then a year later, they promoted me to digital media specialist. So this was on the conversion time where paper stuff was kind of going away. Hard images, digital images were coming into play. So I had to convert their entire library to the hard copies to digital. We did that. I did that. It was one major project I did. I also became their webmaster, and I helped facilitate a few design needs that they needed for ads and any other kind of marketing tools. So that's what I did. For the most part, that's what I did. I managed their digital assets and created digital assets for them. And then I did that for about 4 years, kind of taking on more tasks throughout those years. And then the marketing position opened up after that. So I took it. They offered me the job, so I took it. And I was there. I did that. I handled all the marketing for the Film Commission. So to kind of break down what the Film Commission does, the Film Commission is a state agency, a Utah state agency, and they're a market agency for the state of Utah. The purpose is to promote film production, commercials, TV, whatever that might be, to the state of Utah. And they do that by promoting locations, talent, professional workers, and of course, locations, and also our incentive program that Utah has. So we do that. We bundle all that together and promote it to, hopefully, production companies will see it and like it and want to come to the state of Utah. So my job as with my title there was creative and marketing manager for Utah Film Commission. And I created all their assets. I designed them all. And I'm not a designer, by any means. I wouldn't call myself a designer, but we were running on a slim budget. They still are, I'm probably sure, but we at that time it was a slim budget, so we couldn't really hire out those kinds of needs, and we had to all do it in house. So I designed and created everything, and then I put it into market. I created tools for the producers, managers, the production managers that they needed to do. Gave them the assets and tools that they needed to promote the state, did trade shows, did all that kind of stuff for the state of Utah to get films made here in the state. So that's how I delved into marketing. It was through my film connection, and now I was immersed in marketing. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. So I had an opportunity to come to USU, and I didn't know what I wanted my next step was. I knew I wanted to do something different, but at the same time, I wanted to try to figure out a way to go back to school. And USU gave me a great opportunity because it was local. It's here in Salt Lake. A lot of people know that USU has statewide campuses. So they have a campus in almost every county. I think there's 30 locations right now. And so it offered me a great opportunity to do what I like doing. It was the marketing end, and with a possibility of, hey, I can probably go back to school when I'm ready to. And that's exactly what happened. I came here, did that, and about 2 years in, I decided to go back to school, get my master's in business administration, fulfilled that, and still rocking it on.
Man, Ricky, there's so many things I want to ask questions about. The one that's really top of mind to me right now. So initially you talked about like growing up, you had this dream, like you really wanted to do film, like that was really the thing.
Yeah.
And then the first time you tried it in real life, it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And I think this is so common for students where they get the degree, they do everything they think they need to do, except they don't always try the thing. And so they get into the space and they go, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. So I'm curious, I guess my question is, in that moment where you started to realize this isn't a good fit for me, how did you pivot? Like, how did you get out of, like, how did you allow yourself to change paths? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think it was incremental. I don't think it was like, it's never just sudden. I mean, even I think the only sudden thing about it was I knew I didn't like working on set. And I know tons of people that love it. My brother is also in the film industry. He loves it. They love working on set, and they're greater people for it. But that was probably the only instantaneous thing that happened. I think everything happened incrementally. I was like, hey, I really like film. I really like media, and I really like editing. So I'm going to stay with editing. I want to just figure out how to edit. That's my goal. My goal is to become an editor. Before it was to be a director, and you have that dream, which I'm sure a lot of people out there do. And I'm not saying don't chase it, but also be realistic about it.
Sure.
But that's how I decided. I said, now I'm going to become an editor. And I think that kind of aspect of things, of that mindset, has always stuck with me in that sense of that everything I do revolves around editing. It's because editing, when you edit a massive project or a bigger project or something like that, whatever that might be, if it's a commercial movie or some kind of TV show or so, whatever that is. And I've never edited, a huge production. I've done smaller projects, but it takes a lot of project management to do that. And you have to be able to balance so much stuff and intake a lot of stuff and output a lot of stuff. So as I moved on, I didn't come to this realization until much later. Of course, it wasn't like I knew this was going on, but I was entering a field that I just had the tools because I wanted to be an editor. I collected those tools to become an editor, and I applied those to different things. So they just became something. I just applied them to something different versus to what I thinking was I was going to end up doing, and I think that's why I enjoy what I'm doing now just as much as I would probably if I stayed with film. It's not because I don't like film or hate it. It's just that I'm still utilizing every tool that I have in that, every skill set, every knowledge piece. I'm just applying it to a different thing. And I think that's it happens over a long period of time. It just didn't happen overnight.
Yeah. And I love this point about the transferability. I feel like I just made that word up, but being able to transfer skills from one job to a next. And sometimes the transfer is really easy. You're just switching, companies. But to your point, oftentimes, and I think this is becoming much more common in today's workforce, but you might have three totally different careers in the course of your time as a working individual. And so being able to have skills that are utilized in many different fields, I think is such a key skill. And I love that you were able to identify what are those things not only that I'm good at, but I also enjoy, and being able to utilize those in different spaces. It's so, so cool. I love that.
And even things like I learned in the film world, has come back here, especially here at USU, more than really at the Film Commission. The Film Commission, ironically, although I was surrounded by film and film production, I was more really immersed in the creative aspect and the marketing aspect, really just in depth in that of that angle. And here, I don't do as much design work at USU. We have a design team that does that. So I do more of the management side, strategy side. But just a few months ago, we decided to produce 5 or 6 new commercials, and USU hasn't really done this like on this level for them. At least the statewide campus level hasn't done it at this level before. So, that experience came very handy when they needed a whole new set of commercials to be produced for streaming digital television. So all that stuff came back when I was like, this is how you do it. This is how you make a production sheet. This is how you make a call sheet. This is all the moving pieces, and this is the people you call and the people you manage. So all those things came back pretty quickly. So it's all very useful, what you do in the past and how you apply it to your current or future position.
I love that. Okay, so that takes me to another question that I had. So as you look back and at past roles, but also your current job, what has been some of like the most challenging parts of this type of creative work, but then also maybe some of the more rewarding parts of this type of work?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the most challenging, at least for my aspect, when I look back at my career, is the creative side of when I was at the creating content. I think is very is very hard work. Designers, I give a lot of credit to designers because they're doing one of two things. They're kind of making stuff that is very, very assembly line, or they're creating really cool new things, and that's exhausting. It takes a heavy toll, and it is one of those things. Again, it's like one of those things where I don't miss designing too much. It's not something like I would, like I said, never would call myself a designer, so I don't miss that aspect too much because it's not something that I would say enjoy doing. I just said it just wasn't like, it wasn't that thing, it wasn't that thing. But at the same time, when those pieces came together, when you were to create something and it finally came together, and it was finally, you see it on that printed page and you feel that paper, or you see it on the screen or something like that, then you're like, oh my gosh, all that work just paid off.
I nailed it.
The same goes for here. I may not be designing something, but I have a client who may need, they might need a product or a piece or an asset, and starts with the germ of an idea, then it develops into a bigger idea. Then you hand that over to the designer. You kind of you only handed it to in words, you just hand it over to them. This is what they want. And it's in a Word document used most of the time, and they push it out and make it a design. And you're like, wow, now it's visibly seen. It's not just, words on a paper. It's more than that. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of things are remarkable to me.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, okay. So another thought that I've been having is, so when you worked for the Utah Film Commission, I'm going to call that industry. I don't know if you totally agree with that word, but I kind of think of that as like a more industry-based creativity versus for you now you're in the education sector. Like, talk to me about some of the differences between working as a creative in both of those spaces.
Well, the unique thing about the Film Commission was that as a marketing agency to market the state, you're working with the private sector as well, and you're not just working with we would never market the Utah Film Commission with inside Utah. Doesn't make sense, right? We're trying to get people from New York and California, probably even these days would probably be more broader than that. So we're dealing with a whole different clientele in the private sector. We're trying to promote, trying to get those Hollywood studios online, those New York commercial advertising agencies, marketing agencies, trying to trying to condense them here to the state. And that's the uniqueness of it. It's more of a hybrid type scenario where you're dealing with a lot of, you're dealing with that state government type bureaucracy. You're dealing with the legislative session every year. You're dealing with all that kind of stuff. And then you're also dealing with a lot with the private sector, because that's the goal. The whole goal was economic development. And so you have to have that private sector involved. So that's the unique thing about that's the key difference here. Here, the difference, the thing here is that you have the kind of similar system where it's education, but it's the difference here is the outcome versus you're not trying to get people to come to the state to make a movie. You're trying to get people to give them an education, to get them to better their livelihood, and that to me is that's just a wholly different type of thing to do.
So, Ricky, as you look back on your past experience and maybe even something right now, I'd love to hear a favorite project that you've had, either something that you're just really proud of or something that has just meant a lot to you personally.
Well, I think that I brought this up a little earlier. It was about this commercial campaign that we just recently did here at USU. And it was a very interesting subject because we've done videos, they've done videos and they've done commercials, they've done all this stuff. But the way they've done it in the past was not the way we did it now. We took it more as a production, full-fledged production. And that was new to statewide campuses. They were able to use students for testimonial videos. You'd get a student, they would talk about how, why they chose to come to USU, why they came to a statewide campus. And they were great. They worked great and they still work great. But we weren't reaching an audience of awareness. We weren't making people aware of USU's existence in, let's say, for the sake of argument, Salt Lake. So we weren't, that argument or that awareness was not being made. And we knew that we needed something different because a testimonial video is not really going to make people aware of USU in Salt Lake or in Orem or in Brigham City or Kaysville. So we had decided, I had pitched to them, I said, what we need to do is we need to create commercials that are more ethereal, that they have a narrative, they have a story, but they're not testimonial. They're not direct. They're actually trying to, what we want to do is make people aware that this campus exists. And you can't do that, I don't think, effectively just with a single testimonial video. So we started batting around ideas and started going forth, and we came up with some scripts. And then the next part was, and that tell you the truth, that was the easy part. The hard part was the actual production of stuff.
Yeah.
and it was a big step different for them because it was like, okay, this is what we have to do. We're not going to be using as many students. We still use students, but we're not going to be using as many as we have in the past. And instead, we're going to be hiring actors to do this and hiring, because it's more efficient. Students are very busy people. They've got, they're working. Post-traditional students are, they're working, they're going to school, they have a family. So it's hard to ask them to do a lot of, you got to kind of cover this time. And it's difficult. But when you have paid actors do that, that's their job. That's their life. That's the way they do things. So they come on, they you set them a schedule, you give it to them, you don't have to do any workarounds. And it made it more efficient for us to create, I think it was in the end, 9 commercials that we did across the state. So that was kind of a big leap forward for the statewide campuses to do that, to make it more like a commercial production. And it was hard. It was a difficult thing for us to do. But as we went on, we were learning. I was learning some new things about how the mindset was here at the university, and they were learning how the vision would needed to be, right. So we were both learning on this together. And I think what we ended up with, in the end product was, from the first to the end, was better. We kept on increasing that much better. And I thought we have now, I think we're now even ready to move on to something even bigger. So those kinds of experiences are good for not just myself, but for the campus, for the institution as a whole.
I love that. And I love that you're making a unique contribution. It's interesting. Oftentimes, if a student says, oh, well, maybe I'll work in higher education, they immediately think they have to be a professor. And I love that you're opening up the doors and saying, education, you need all of the same types of people that you would at any business, more or less. And so I love that you're kind of opening the door to students thinking about different spaces of work that they could look
at. That's a good comment, because I was just talking earlier today about, education and what you need to know. And of course, if you're going into a certain position, into the educational field, it's good to know as much. I didn't know hardly anything when I stepped into the role of marketing manager here, educational wise. There was meetings in my first few months here. I was like, I have no idea what these people are talking about and the terms they're using.
The acronyms.
Yeah, you're like, I don't even know what post-traditional, traditional. I didn't know what they were talking about. I had no idea. And at the time, there was kind of this moment where everybody was using different terms to mean the same thing, and I was just like really confused. And I was like, well, just keep on listening, and that's what it is. It is true, and asking questions too. You always, when you said that, what did you mean? But yeah, I think coming into it's exactly what you said. I mean. There's going to be those positions where they want to have that great educational background because those are required and necessary. But there's also a lot of positions that don't really necessitate that. But when you know it and you understand it, everything goes so much smoother. Now, everything today for me is just like, oh yeah, I can follow the conversation. I understand what you're saying, and I understand the outcomes better because of that. And that's leading to even me desiring to either stay in the educational field as I look towards doing something different. I really liked the field a lot. I really enjoyed it. So I don't know if I want to leave education as I progress in my career.
Oh, so interesting. Well, Ricky, I can't believe we've been chatting for like a half an hour. That blows my mind a little bit. But I do want to close with one final question. And that is, as you look back at like 18-year-old Ricky, what kinds of career advice would you give yourself now?
I would say that, yes, you look at your 18-year-old, man, I'm not trying to nix on any of the 18-year-olds out there, but you don't know a whole lot, and I think you think you do, and that's fine. I mean, you think you do, but you don't. And that's, you come to that when you get older, you come to that. That's fine. But I would tell myself, expect the unexpected. I think that's a good rule to live by, because you don't know what's going to come up in front of you. You may, like I said, you may find something you think you'll love and you won't. And you may look at something and you think, I don't want to do that. And you would end up loving it. I would never have guessed that I would end up in marketing or advertising or anything like that, because, not at this level, the level I'm doing it now. I would probably even consider that, so keep the doors open. There's a lot of opportunity out there in fields that you're probably not even looking at, and you should try them out. At least if you have the opportunity to try something out like that, you should try it out.
What a great nugget to end on. Well, Ricky, thanks so much for hopping on the call today. I loved, you have so many nuggets of wisdom throughout this entire conversation. So I'm excited to go back and listen to it myself. But thank you so much for your time and giving back to your Aggie family.
No problem. I appreciate you having me.
We hope you loved this episode of the USU Career Studio podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and share this episode with your friends and family.